Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I am Michael Zalavari, and oh my god, there is so much racing that we have to catch up on, and we're really bad at planning our time because life is hard and schedules are difficult, but we are going to make an effort to catch up on the WEC Portimao round 2 of Season 9 today, and give us a bit of an update on all of the LMH and LMDh permutations that have been happening over the last little while. There's been a lot of news that's come out over the last 2 or 3 months that we've not quite touched on as much as we should have. So that'll be our goal for today. And joining me on this journey today, I have Oliver Trevorverse. Ollie, good to have you back. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
Nice.
It's finally good warm weather.
Oh, don't. Okay, that's it. Podcast's over, that's it.
Too easy. Too easy.
Oh, I am so jealous. It is properly winter down under, and even though it's does this even sound cold to you? If you are listening, leave a comment. 12 degrees, 13 degrees. I'm absolutely freezing my bum off here.
Oh, it's nice little knitwear weather.
Oh, it's
lovely.
It's the worst, and I hate it. Anyway, there's been a lot of racing, hasn't there? We are so far behind.
Yes, this European season is starting to kick off now.
And it's like some seasons or series are already talking about their summer break happening. So it's come up on us so quickly. And like there's 2 ELMS rounds that we have to talk about. There's the Nürburgring 24 hours that we have to wrap up. There's been a bunch of IMSA rounds that we haven't quite cottoned on to yet. Plus, in 2 months' time, we're going to be talking about Le Mans. We're actually going to be talking about Le Mans the day after, hopefully. Well, at least this will be the day after Le Mans happens this will be the day before Le Mans at the time of recording in 2 months' time. So there's plenty of talking to do. But before we get into any of that, we'll just give a shout out to our sponsor, the RacingLine.app, your motorsport calendar. Customize your notifications for any series that you want to follow. Converted straight into your time zone, now on Android, which is very, very exciting. Have you downloaded the app yet, Ollie? Have you actually had a look at how it works?
I have, yes. Get in.
It's pretty nifty. I'm very much enjoying it. Of course, like as an Android user, I've been shilling this product for the past 6 months without actually even having it. But now I do have it, and I can say it's very, very good. And the notifications keep me up at all hours of the night because I choose to be notified of things when I should be sleeping. But it does well.
Such is life of
exactly.
A sports car fan.
Especially a fan on this side of the planet where the sports car racing happens in the evening. But anyway, let's talk about some sports car racing that happened in the evening just last week. Well, evening for me. WEC 8 Hours of Portimao, round 2 of the Season 9. We had, of course, the new Glickenhaus make its debut in the championship. A new track for the championship as well. Not quite a new format. The 8-hour format has been used at Bahrain now twice before, to varying degrees of success. Ollie, what were your thoughts on how the 8 Hours of Portimao went for the WEC as a whole, as a racing product?
I think it was good. It's difficult to keep everyone engaged for such a long race. There was a bit of a lull in the middle where not so much was happening. It was just general lapping from each car. But then just with everything, it kind of converges all to the end of the race where then the different strategies kind of overlap and come back together. So I think it was good in that respect, that it didn't just stay apart and just fizzle out. There was still interest coming down right to the end. Would there be a safety car with the stranded high class?
Yes.
With 20 minutes to go, there could have been a safety car which punched it up and then made the battle for the race win interesting. And we still had the fight in LMP2 right at the end in the last stint.
Yes, we did.
That's a great example of how the race was bookended, because there was the fighting at the start, even between the top 2 in P2 were fighting on the first lap, if not the first corner.
Yes.
And there was lots to talk about, and then there was the ebbs and flows of talking about how Glickenhaus got on.
Yeah,
lots to talk about there, but lots of talking points.
Yeah, and we'll expand on all of these as we go through the through this podcast today. I think you're absolutely right about there being a lull, and I think this is a problem. Not necessarily a problem. I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's definitely a product that you see a lot more for those longer races, for the 8 hours, the 10 hours, the 12 hours, even to an extent. It does get to a point where the strategies have diverged so far that it's hard to keep track of, not that it's hard to keep track of where everyone is, but everyone's kind of in their own little bubble. But the mid-race safety car for the stranded ARC Bratislava car in the gravel trap of turn 8, that really threw the cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak, really kind of reinvigorated the race. So, is it a problem that the safety car reinvigorated things? Is that something that we should be concerned by? Is that saying that the racing product is not good enough on its own?
No, not necessarily per se. I think it's just reinforcing the need to exercise patience with this ACO style of racing.
Yep.
Where you have it set up. You basically spend the middle portion of the race after it started to settle down. You use that to just look out at who's burning their amateur drive time now, or who's burning their tires through now, compared to who's going slow, conserving tire life, fuel maybe, to then set it up for the final stint, or the final hour, or the final hour and a half.
Yeah.
I think part of that is enhanced by using live timing, because then you can react and understand what's happening in real time, so that you can then kind of be excited for the final stint or the final hour. Whereas if you don't have that, then you might just think, it's just going to be more of the same, when usually at these races it isn't. Part of that is trust, and you just got to trust that these ebbs and flows will all kind of overlap and line up with each other at the end. It's kind of, you think of it as maybe like
I've just got an analogy that I can drop in right here. Like the shorter endurance races, like the 3 hours, the 4 hours, they're like your T20 of endurance racing. They're all hack and smash, and everything's happening.
Big bash.
Yeah, exactly. It's the big bash.
Side door bash.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's true for some of the LMS racing we've seen this season. It has been absolutely door bashing. And then on the other hand, your 24-hour races, they're like your test matches. They're, you got to be you can kind of come in and out of it. But each time you come in, you can kind of get the threads of the stories all together and really invest that time into understanding what's going on. Then you can leave, and then you can come back and get that same sort of thing. Whereas this is the 10 hours or the 8 hours, they're kind of, or your 12 hours even, they're kind of like your one dayers. They start off, there's the power play to start with, and everyone's trying to settle in and sort themselves out. And then you got those middle overs where, the spinners are on, and they're just rotating the strike. And then towards the end of the innings, that's when you start to get the tension and the big shots. That's kind of like the analogy that's working in my head. And for those in cricket playing countries, that all makes sense. And anyone who doesn't know what cricket is just going, what are they talking about at the moment? Would you say that's fair?
Way to alienate listeners.
Yeah, sorry everyone in America. I don't know, it's like the difference between, I don't know, do they have any long sports in America or different formats? I don't know.
Baseball?
Yeah, but even then, I don't know. I don't really watch any American sports. That's filled with too many ads. Anyway, speaking of, you should download us.
One way you could think of it as, in terms of the way these sports kind of ebb and flow, is another example that I think you missed, that we both agree on, is like the Tour de France and Grand Tour cycling, where you've got the storylines of the stage versus the storylines of the overall, and then you got climbing competitions, sprint competitions, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's all layers overlapping, and how they all line up at some point. So the way I think of it is like different planets orbiting the sun, and it's like they're all orbiting at different speeds, but sometimes they line up, and it's kind of trying to get those stars to align, or those planets to align, like in the last hour kind of thing.
And this race did pretty well at that. Even with the safety car interruption in the middle, we had a tense, controversial, for the questionable reasons, finish in LMP1. A very, very good finish in LMP2. That was a cracking battle to the flag, even after everything that went on in that class. GTE-Pro was marred by a few issues for the Porsches that we'll talk about further on, which is actually a part of the conditions and a part of the track as well. And I do briefly want to discuss the Algarve Circuit for prototype racing. And then GTE-Am was... That had so many things going on in that class with favorites getting taken out and running into problems and penalties. It was a bit of a madhouse, but a very deserved victor in that respect. Let's talk about Algarve the Circuit. We've seen it in the 4-hour format for the ELMS a few times. It's been the season closer in 2017 and 2018, and I think also maybe 2019. How do we think it went for the 8 hours and the WEC? Possibly a high quality of driving talent and professionalism in the WEC, and did that make it better, or did that make it different? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it was quality. It's great to watch with the rise and fall. The amateurs love the track. It doesn't have the sort of name and provenance of Spa-Francorchamps, but it still has that sort of similar aesthetic in terms of the elevation changes of the corners. Definitely. So it looks like a fun track for the amateur drivers to enjoy. It has a bit of everything, really. It's got the high speed corners, the low speed corners, the long straights. And
the sweeping sections as well, really cool. Something I noticed while watching is that it was a lot more difficult to pass the GT cars. Well, that's not actually true. Let me try that entire thing again. Because you can pass at so many different parts of the circuit, because it is wide and you've got these great corner combinations, it means that when you're battling through traffic, you have to be more daring. There was a few times that there was contact in traffic, I think particularly with the LMP2s, but there was also one or two instances the Glickenhaus got involved with a LMP2 car before it had its major accident. I think one of the AF Corsa cars had a touch with the higher class cars. It's one of those things that because you can pass, if you're in a battle, you must pass, because if you lose even 1-2 tenths of a second, that can blow out to half a second by the time you get to the end of the next timing beam. So it seemed like it was more difficult to pass, but I think the reality of that was that it was easier to pass, but you had to be more daring to pass.
I think that's a product as well of stratification.
Yes.
So stratification is definition is kind of like layerification, making sure each class has got its distinct band of lap time that it fits in, so that they don't overlap. And if they overlap, then it muddies up everything.
Yeah.
So bringing those layers together by slowing down LMP2 so they're closer to GTE-Pro, and slowing down Hypercar, or Hypercar being slower than LMP1, it then means that it's less easy to overtake a lower class car. So therefore, to get past, you need to up the risk reward kind of balance or equation. So I think it's just a product of what we're going to be seeing now in before it shakes out. So there are rumours of Michelin bringing a better tyre for the hypercars, so then that should help out with this pace balance. But we saw at Spa drivers taking risks, P2s taking risks and writing off chassis at Blanchimont. I think that's going to be a product of this stratification of this season. Teams, especially in the higher classes, they're going to take those risks to try and get through in traffic, because that's one of the only ways you can cement a performance gap over another team. If you can be able to pass one GT 2 corners before another car, then you've got potentially a nice gap. You can break away. You can potentially break a toe that would help you get passed by the car behind.
Yeah.
So these things are really crucial in endurance racing, and it ups the risk value, and therefore it ups the danger value. So, like I said, we've had some issues with cars being written off, but thankfully,
no drivers being written off.
Well, yes, but also it was a pretty damage-free in the most part. There were some issues, especially with the Glickenhaus.
Yeah, and we'll talk explicitly about that and about what our thoughts on Glickenhaus's debut. It's innocuous, ignominy, that word debut. But we'll discuss that. I don't think it's. I can certainly see your point there, and that's not something I had considered. But Spa, I didn't think Spa was that different or that affected or that unexpected in terms of the inter-class traffic. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking for something that isn't there.
Yeah. These things will. It's kind of just a little shift in how the races are run, and I think it's just something to get used to.
Yeah. I think back to the track. I think Portimao needs more cool racing and needs more eyes on it. I mean, obviously with F1 there now, it certainly increase its profile. But I think Martin Haven and Alan McNish were talking right at the very top of the broadcast, saying with McNish saying this is one of those tracks that makes you want to come out of retirement. So I think. Because I don't think McNish ever raced there, because it's still a relatively new circuit in modern senses.
Yeah, and it's kind of off the beaten track.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively or metaphorically. Yeah, you don't see many high profile events there, but also it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So its stature and its prestige is certainly on the up now with the ELMS, and with, I think the first race I watched there was a blank paint GT race, like 5 years ago or something like that. So now to see MotoGP there, ELMS, WEC and Formula One, it's certainly grown in stature. But so has the LMH class with another race in the books, and this was, I got to say, much more competitive, much more thrilling from a tension building perspective than the race at Spa. Spa, it was clear pretty much from the outset, apart from maybe one stint, that the Toyotas had much better pace. But at Portimao, the Alpine was certainly it felt like it was the much quicker car. And I know that's not the case, but it felt like it could actually mount a challenge to the Toyotas. And for a lot of the race, with Lapierre and Thomas Laurent in the car as well, it was the fastest car on track. It was the fastest car in qualifying as well. So it was mighty close to the end. In the end, it was not strategy, but fuel economy that let them down. And this is a product of the LMH balancing system, the grandfathering system for the old LMP1 car. Ollie, you've run the numbers for your fantastic, incredible sports car engineering blog that you should, if you haven't checked that out, you should definitely check that out. What did you find hidden in the data that you could share with us?
Well, it's not exactly hidden.
What did you find? What did you go to the effort to find in the data that none of us who have less time or less care or less effort to offer didn't find?
Right. So, hypercar, their engine powers have gone up, but also their weight has gone up. So a lot more of a lump to move around the racetrack. So upping the engine power, upping the weight, but keeping the stint lengths reasonably similar. What you got to do, you got to throw more fuel at it. So the fuel tanks for Le Mans Hypercar and in future LMDh as well, they're going to have to be accommodating for bigger fuel tanks. When you grandfather an LMP1 tub into this, you can't cut the tub up to fit the fuel tank.
Yeah.
It's designed around the fuel tank kind of position and the engine position. It's just one of those hard points that you just can't move without redesigning from the ground up. And so their cars, they have a fuel allowance as part of the balance of performance. So every car has an energy amount per stint that they can use, and that energy is converted into the mass of fuel per pit stop or per stint, and it's just physically not possible to fit the amount that the Alpines have allowed or given to them in the rules inside the car. So on pace, they are almost identical on pace to the Toyotas, which is ridiculous. We'll talk about that later. It's just that they can go as fast, but they can't go as far.
Yeah.
So at this race, they would have to do an extra pit stop on average. The Toyotas didn't do the same number of pit stops, so it kind of muddies it up a bit. But you can think of it as for a 6 or an 8 hour race, they look like they have to do an extra pit stop, which gives them, a minute and a half, let's say, extra on their total race time compared to an LMH product, despite having, let's say, identical lap times.
Yeah, and that was certainly the case at Spa-Francorchamps, and that was, again, certainly the case at Algarve. We saw, I think it was it 21 or 31? I think it was 31 lap stints from the Alpine, whereas the Toyotas were making it to 36, 37 laps per stint. It was kind of ridiculous. Yeah. The length of stint that the Toyotas could get out, because they were pitting it around the hour mark like the old LMP1 cars used to back in like 2013, 2014, the first round of the hybrid regulations, where they could basically pit on the hour every hour like the old GTE cars. So when you pulled all this into your analysis, what did it show you in the end? What were the differences between the cumulative pit stop time for the Toyota number 8 car, because I think that had the least stops, versus the number 36?
Fewest stops.
Yes. Pardon me. Sorry, I'm a filthy convict. I do not speak the Queen's English.
So the number 8 had around total cumulative pit stop time at around 8.5 minutes, and the number 7 had an extra pit stop, so about 9.5 minutes. So a bit less than a minute discrepancy between the two. But then the Alpine, they had nearly 11 minutes. So that really illustrates. And if you overlay kind of their cumulative pit stop time against where they take those stops in the race, it kind of shows you how often over time they have to get into the pits. So those lines, they diverge, and it just shows you, that discrepancy is just going to get a bit worse and worse over time. And then if you kind of extrapolate or extend those lines for 24 hours to look at what would happen at the 24 hours of Le Mans, that's only going to get worse and worse. So if you triple this race distance, you're then going to get a discrepancy of
3-4 minutes more,
maybe over a lap, let's say, just in the pit stops. So on the one hand, having the average lap times being so close, that is something that is really interesting in terms of confidence in the auto BoP system, balancing cars that are wildly different. This is an LMP1, which is performance. It was designed for a completely different performance window compared to this LMH, which is a hybrid. The LMP1 is a non-hybrid. There are so many differences. It's 2-wheel drive versus 4-wheel drive. So it's amazing how they could get these two cars built to different regulations within on an average pace of like a pace window of like 150 laps. If you average them all together, the lap times are going to be 200th different between the 7 and the 36.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
That's mental.
Let's talk about that, because I've looked through your article, and that's the first thing that comes up on it. That absolutely astounded me. So if you take what you've done here is you've taken the top 60% of the lap times and you've taken an average of them. And I just want to say these numbers because it's just astounding to me. So for the number 7 Toyota, it's a 132.177. That's the average of the top 60% of the lap times throughout the 8 hours of the Algarve race. The number 8 Toyota, a 132.212. So, that's 0.05 of a second between the two Toyotas. The Alpine sits in between them. It's a 132.194. So across the same number of laps, the Alpine certainly has the pace of the Toyotas. And if you actually look at the, a lap time graph, which you put in here, which I'm just going to share in the live chat now, the Alpine's quicker at peak speed. I did not expect that. What do you reckon? How has that happened? Is that just the Nicola Lapierre effect? But Toyota has good drivers as well.
It could be. I think it shows how the Alpine was really pushing.
Yeah.
So maybe taking more risks. It might be the case that they're finding it harder to overtake just slightly compared to because their consistency is slightly lower. So if you kind of take an average gradient of that race trace for their best laps, then they're going to be slightly steeper. So maybe over the 24 hours, that discrepancy stretches the average a bit slower than the Toyotas.
Okay, yeah.
It's ridiculous how they're still pretty closely matched.
Yeah, as I said, there's a bigger distance in the Toyotas, the difference in average between the two Toyotas, than there is between the Alpine and either Toyota, which is just ridiculous to me. For those who maybe don't have the article at home, I'll just briefly describe what's happening in the graph. So the two Toyotas are basically their lap times, start very, very close to the 131 mark and then sort of trail off pretty consistently and nicely. The Alpine starts at the same mark, but actually has a bit of a shallower trace to start with, and then a steeper trace over the end. So you basically got the Alpine line crossing over the two Toyota lines. So in the middle, they're actually pretty average. So their average lap time, as we've described, is basically the same. And we've talked about the stint length to say that the Alpine lost another minute and a half in the pits. If you look at the results for the race, and let's talk about the results. It was a Toyota 1-2. They were separated by a second. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the Alpine was only a minute away from the two Toyotas. So if you remove that extra pit stop from the equation, I know you can't just do that, and it doesn't just simply work like that, because that's part of the grandfathering process and the fact that they can't fit the fuel in, and etc. etc. But if you remove that minute and a half from their race time, they would have beaten the Toyotas. That to me is astounding, considering the fact that the ACO has traditionally been very, what's the right word here? Very unkind to grandfathered cars, because the whole point of grandfathering a car is extending a car's use period, right? You're not generally going to keep it competitive. It's a matter of extending the longevity of an investment, and you don't generally see a grandfathered car be given the opportunity to be competitive, because no one wants to see the old regulations beat the new regulations. That's like the opposite of what the ACO wants to see from this hypercar season. So the fact that they're even that close, the fact that they're that close on lap time, to me is just astounding. The fact that they've been given that opportunity is astounding.
Yes, and I mentioned earlier about how these are two different cars built to two wildly different technical regs. Looking into the future, we're going to have two technical regs as part of convergence.
Yep.
But their intended performance window is close together. So if it's possible to balance these two wildly different technical regs so well, then that gives you confidence into thinking that they're going to balance lap times well with LMDh and LMH. Now, that's a big cloud hanging over the potential investments from OEMs on the fence. And this is what I mentioned in my write-up in terms of Alpine. If they're using this as a test bed to try and convince someone, using this data should be very valuable to convince someone, because you say, look, on these lap times, we're very competitive. We can compete. The issue is stint lengths. That shouldn't be an issue going forwards if we make an LMDh.
Yeah, or an LMH.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
precisely.
And if you're one of the boffins who's worked on the WC Auto BoP process, looking at that data must be extremely gratifying. That's just a big tick in the box if you're someone who's worked on that process to get it to converge like that. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It now, in terms of the product, watching on television, it's still not there because you still have this equal pace, but you don't have them equal on track because of the discrepancy in the pit stops. What they could do to fix that is either one of two things: make the Alpine faster so that the lap times aren't equal, and then but keep the pit stop discrepancy. Yeah. Arguably, then they would drink more fuel, meaning that the pit stop
discrepancy could exist anyway.
Would get worse.
Yeah.
So there's that. It's not the best idea. Or what you can do is you can reduce the energy allowance per stint of the Toyotas so that you then make them sit in the pits for one more time.
So effectively equalizing the stint lengths then.
Yeah, exactly. So the stint lengths will be equal. The trouble with that is you would then push both cars back over the 8-hour period by a minute and a half to kind of be around where the Alpine finished, and the gap to the LMP2s there would be about 3 laps.
Yeah.
Whether that's acceptable or not is a whole political question with the stratification system. I think that's fine. I think that's what they should do: reduce the energy allowance for the Toyotas or for LMHs, and let them race wheel to wheel. Toyota have had a leg up for the championship already. Alpine shouldn't be that much in the way for the title if they allow them to race wheel to wheel from now on to the end of the season. I think they should just get on with it and let's have some wheel-to-wheel racing all the way through.
Yeah, look, as much as I'd love to see that, I think the ACO is kind of fine with where it is at the moment. Like, if you are the ACO, you've got your long-term investor, you're keeping them happy because you've got them committed to your new regulations and you've got them winning comfortably, and they're not really threatened by a car running the old regulations, and you've got a potential new client testing the waters, being competitive without ever really having a chance at winning. And I think the ACO is going to be like mostly happy with that. As much as I'd love to see a proper equalized stint lengths, equalized pace, whatever battle between the Alpine and the Toyota and the Glickenhaus, we'll include them in this conversation, why not? Across the whole race length, it's whatever. I just don't think the ACO, I don't think that's what the ACO wants from this season. And looking at Portimao, I think they would be very happy with the product they've got. Whether or not that's a great viewing product is another thing. It's still going to keep the people like you and I who are like neck deep in this stuff interested, because we love pulling apart the numbers and we love endurance racing for the sake of endurance racing. So we're not going to leave the championship. LMP2 and GTE-Am have plenty of action to fill in the gaps, and so that's going to bring in other people. And so I think the ACO is kind of fine with that. And I'd love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's carry that same tone to the next conversation topic, which is Toyota, who made some very puzzling decisions around their arrangements for the end of the race. So the number 8, after their additional pit stop, came out of the pits only 2 or 3 seconds ahead of their sister car. Remember, this is 20 minutes left in the race. They then instructed the number 8 car, which I think had Buemi at the wheel, to drop behind the number 7 car and allow the number 7 to take the lead and take the win, only to rescind that a 3 or 4 laps later. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that's a bit of a piss take, really. Like, yeah, we get it if you're going to say, stay in this order or swap around. But just to be playing freaking merry-go-round with the top 2 cars, like they don't give a shit about the rest of the race, that to me is a bit disrespectful.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a good word to describe it. Apparently, it was to do with the 7 claiming that they had more pace and they were being held up, which is the classic excuse for team orders. I thought at first it was potentially to give the number 8 a tow for a few laps so they could help save fuel. We've seen the Toyotas kind of do this where they keep swapping to offset their fuel usage, so that they don't pit next to each other and screw up each other's pit stops. And the potential for that was quite big here at Portimao because the 8 was trying to eke out the fuel mileage so that it avoided doing the extra stop, which the 7 had to do. So we knew on the last stint they were potentially running on fumes in terms of, low fuel, and to be able to eke out that stint length to get to the finish nice and safe, maybe it would have been good to have the 7 in front to give it a tow. It's quite a long straight. It's kind of a bit like Fuji, where you've got this really long start-finish straight. Yeah,
and apparently they had a blistering headwind down that straight on the race day as well.
Yeah, so I think maybe that could have been a reason to do such a weird changeover
then
in the
why
last
why not say that? Then why not say, hey, let the other guy pass, sit in his slipstream, save the fuel? Why not make that public?
Well, then you would open up the opportunity for Jose Maria Lopez to just sit behind and watch the car in front run out of fuel. Because what a baller move that would be. Told, like, hey, your teammate's running out of fuel, go and give him a slipstream and just say no and watch them have to pit.
Well, that would be
brilliant.
That would certainly get put Lopez in the shit books, wouldn't it? And like, this might be something that a few people, new watchers of sports car racing or new listeners to this podcast, might find a bit troubling. Team orders in general, but like, I'm not perturbed by the team orders existing. Are you?
It's a team sport.
Yeah, exactly. Sports car racing is a team sport. It's not just about one driver, one car. It's about the team. And like we've seen this in seasons past. We've seen this with Audi. We've seen this with Porsche. Porsche won a championship because they had team orders throughout the entire second half of the season in 2015. Like the fact that they put their team orders in for every single race after Le Mans. Everyone was crying, oh, this is bullshit, why would they even do this? And then when the championship leading car had problems in the last round of the season at Bahrain and had to limp across the line in last place in class and just managed to win the championship, it's like, well, that's why team orders exist. I don't have any issue with team orders. I have the issue with the way that they were implemented right then and there, swapping back and forth.
I have more issues with team orders when there's less competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Historically, a good example for this is when Corvette, they were the only ones racing each other over in America. It would have been ALMS days,
GT1 days.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of embarrassing when you're just racing yourselves. Now they're racing against Alpine and Glickenhaus, but at the moment they're still, because of the pit discrepancy, they're kind of still racing against themselves, and it is doing a disservice to the people watching to do these sorts of team orders where you want to trust your drivers. They're supposed to be some of the best drivers in the world, that you can trust them to race each other even just a little bit. It's something that we've grown used to in just having the Toyotas just following each other 2 by 2 along, like Noah's Ark. and we kind of want them to add a little bit of spice. Now, they can't afford to risk any issues though, because the Alpine is so close, and they've never had historically anyone this close. So it's something that they're never going to do. There's no incentive to do it. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, I think not only that, it's also a little disrespectful, and that's my issue. I honestly wouldn't have had any issues if they just said hold position for the last 20 minutes, or if they just said swap and hold position, but like swap to swap back. That to me is a bit of a piss take. Either way, they won. They can take their victory and put it with all the other meaningless victories they've had over the past two or three seasons. That's so mean to say, but it's one of those difficult things, right? Because if they're not really fighting any just competition on the same playing field, then do those victories really mean anything? I mean, yeah, you've got 3 Le Mans in a row.
Not their fault.
Yeah, I absolutely. You can only beat who turns up, but I don't know. This is treading into legacy and differences in history and etc. etc. Maybe we should move on from this. Glickenhaus,
ACO bad,
right?
am I right?
Pardon?
ACO bad. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. ACO bad. What? FIA good? No, that can't be right.
No, IMSA good.
That can't be right either. Supercars good, even though they've got their own parody. Anyway, leave that behind. Glickenhaus. One car, they had issues. Their goal was to get to the finish. Their goal was to beat the P2s. Unfortunately, they had a major problem thanks to a on-track incident where I think it was Briscoe at the wheel at the time moved across while passing 2 GTE-Am cars that were being just passed by the 22 United LMP2 into turn 5 on the Portimao circuit, and that basically killed the 2 GTE-Am cars, which we'll talk about a little later on. And then also in the process of getting that car refired, Briscoe fried the clutch, so they had to spend an hour fixing the clutch. This was also after they were struggling with tyre wear and tyre overpressure. One car in that race, that's not the way that they would have wanted that race to go for them.
Yeah, lots to learn, I think is the best way to describe it, because they had the tyre issues. They were being described in terms of switching on the tyres coming out of the pits as an issue, especially in qualifying, and then trying to double stint. Part of the key of these pit regs is you want to make sure you can double stint, because you can't refuel and change tyres at the same time anymore. So if you can do a pit stop without changing tyres, you save 20 seconds, let's say, to the time it takes to swap the tyres around.
Then the question
or add
is
new wheels on.
Yeah, and then the question is, do you then lose that 20 seconds by not having good tyres over the course of your stint, or having tyre degradation over the course of your stint? That's the flip-flop there. But they seem to really struggle in the first part of the race. I think Westbrook had 1 or 2 laps where he was... the start wasn't great for them anyway, because they were behind some of the GTE cars at the start. But even after fiddling his way out of that, Westbrook was languishing at the tail of the LMP2 field for a long time.
Yeah, it was kind of a bit reminiscent of the start of Spa, where the Alpine couldn't get past the LMP2s.
Yeah.
It's just they only had one to deal with the Alpine, with the Alpine and the United Autosports, whereas with the Glickenhaus here, they were just stuck in traffic, and they had to wait a long time to get clear track. But it's a learning process. They've got a lot of information. It's all well and good having a 30-hour test at Aragon where you're on your own. They'll learn some more things from racing and change the setup, learn about how the tyres work, especially in the multi-stints, the race pace, that sort of thing. Hopefully they'll do well at Monza, but we'll see. We've had the issue with the long right hand turn at Portimao, Parabolica, Curva Grande,
the Lesmos,
right hand corners.
Both Lesmos as well, right-handers.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Encouraging signs, though? You are allowed to say no.
unconvinced.
Unconvinced?
So far, but I'm expecting to be convinced in future.
I think Monza will be a much better litmus test for their actual capabilities. I think Portimao is a circuit that does not suit the design philosophy of the car, and Glickenhaus has said that himself. He said it is a car to be driven at Le Mans, and we've seen that the high downforce setups in seasons past do not work at Le Mans, and the low downforce setups that work at Le Mans do not work at other rounds of the series, even to an extent Spa-Francorchamps. So I think Monza will be a much better indicator of where they are, what improvements they need to make, and how far away they are from the accepted pace of LMH at the moment. They were setting some decent lap times though, and they did end up getting classified, which, by the way, is a better result than a few other recent forays into the top class of prototype racing that have existed. Nissan particularly being one. You could also argue that Ginetta is another, but we'll leave that conversation well enough alone, shall we? So Monza, they'll have 2 cars. Hopefully that'll be a better race for them. Let's look at LMP2 now, and it was a frantic start in LMP2. You had the pole sitter and their teammate getting into contact around turn 3, and if you are a team manager, that is absolutely 0 out of 10 what you want to happen at the first corner, isn't it? The first rule of motor racing is don't hit your teammate. And
then the asterisk is on that, don't spin them as well.
Exactly. And so you had, honestly, it was amazing that who was it? Gonzalez? No, not Gonzalez. Who am I talking about? It was Gonzalez in the number 38 who was facing backwards. It was honestly incredible that he just didn't get cleaned up by anyone. The whole field managed to...
Blomqvist and Da Costa. Was it Blomqvist and Da Costa? The 2 guys started and finished the cars together. So that's why they had the kind of narrative of, will they do it again?
Yes.
Kind of thing, I think.
At the very end of the race. I guess, spoilers, everyone. Those 2 cars that were, making contact and spinning backwards in turn 2 on the first lap, turn 3 on the first lap, rather, were the 2 cars in a grandstand finish for the win in LMP2 right at the very end. The fact that the number... 38 car managed to navigate the field and get back to fight for a race win, let alone take the race win. That to me is incredible, and I don't know why I'm surprised. This is still JOTA Sport, but I did not expect this from this team this season. It's been a fair while since JOTA Sport has been a powerhouse, but boy, it is so good to see them back and being heavyweights again.
Yeah, I think it really highlights the standard of LMP2 teams when we're kind of forgetting and sleeping on JOTA Sport.
Yeah, right.
When we've got WRT who are amazing. You've got United Autosports who won pretty much everything for a year ago. Yeah, it's brilliant that how the standard that we have at the top. Part of that, obviously, is having some ridiculously good silver drivers.
Yeah. And some just ridiculously good drivers. I had this, kind of coming to Jesus moment at the beginning of the Portimao race. Holy crap, half of the field in LMP2 has Formula 1 experience. That's ridiculous. That is so crazy to me that these guys are effectively drivers at the pinnacle of motorsports, or have been at the pinnacle of motorsports, and they're racing not even in the top class, not even in a fully pro outfit. These are, nominally pro-am cars with a silver driver, but still, it's ridiculous how good the quality in P2 is at the moment.
It's a good setup as well for angling yourself for a drive in the new top class when all of these new OEMs join. So
yeah, and we'll talk about that in the second half of today's episode. So JOTA Sport had a great race, following on from their double podium at Spa-Francorchamps. They picked up another. They picked up 1-2 this time. So big wins for them, and for the number 38, Roberto Gonzalez, Antonio Felix da Costa, and Anthony Davidson. That's really, really cool to see, because after being championship contenders a few years ago, they went through a really rough run as part of the Dragon Speed outfit last season, and also I think the season before. So to see them back on like giant killing pace, being the giant pace, that's really, really cool to see. Thoughts on Blomqvist and Gallego? I just out of the blue, thoughts?
Great. There's a lot of people memeing on Sean Gallego. Sure, he had some tough return to P2 in Asian Le Mans Series with a few mistakes, but also silenced those critics, winning, was it both the last two rounds?
Both the last two rounds, but particularly the last round for me. That was the one that made me go, whoa.
Yeah, and he's turned that around, and you think at this race where there's a lot more on the line, he would be maybe taking more risks and making more mistakes, but actually he's done really great, and with Blomqvist, brilliant pro driver. There's nothing more to add to that, really.
I kind of disagree there. Like, sure, he's quick, and that's incredible, and he's awesome for the team. But to me, he's been a bit too aggressive. Like, some of the moves he was making in traffic were making me, making my eyes water. What's the expression there? It wasn't clean, and I think that's a part of the fact that he's come from a GTE-3 factory program. I think it was former
BMW Pro.
Yes, that is exactly right. And so maybe he's just more used to a bit more of a bump and a barge, but like in prototypes, like he got points deducted from his license for making contact with the Alpine going up Eau Rouge, and he hasn't really shown a cool head in those situations. I don't know. It's just something about his driving style strikes me as a bit too aggressive, over aggressive, uncompromising is the word I want to use. That's the word. And sometimes when processing traffic, you do have to be compromising. So I just want to put a tab there, and we can return to that in, I don't know, 2 or 3 months time post Le Mans and see how that changes. What about the rest of the field? WRT finished in 4th place after taking 2 drive-through penalties, kind of shooting themselves in the foot there. They finished 1 lap and 30 seconds back from... 1 lap back from the race winner, but that was less than a lap back in total because of where the Toyota cars finished. So, within 2 drive-through penalties of potentially being in the mix, certainly within 2 drive-throughs of being on the podium. Team United Autosports taking that one, continuing their streak of podiums, not their streak of wins, unfortunately. That has finally come to an end in WEC competition, so big tears if you're a United fan. You've gone from winning everything to becoming 3rd. Oh no. I was really impressed with Inter Europol, and I want to really stress this. They have become world beaters overnight with the Orica and with Habsburg. Where have I gone? With Delatraz and Brundle. That is an incredible driver lineup, and it kind of shows to me that their problem all along was the Ligier, which is bad if you're a Ligier fan, I guess.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they've never had a driver lineup like this as well. They previously had, I think, a double silver lineup in European Le Mans Series.
Yeah, featuring Rene Binder and Mateusz Zakian.
Binder. Yeah, and Smichowski isn't the best silver, but that's part of the thing with the Orica is it helps your amateur driver gain lap time.
And we've seen a number of
easier to drive.
Yeah, and we've seen a number of silver drivers make the transition from either the Ligier chassis or the Dallara chassis to the Orica and be immediately quick. And one that I can think of straight off the top of my head is Fritz van Aert. I think he was a classic example going from the Dallara, which was an absolute we'll call it a beast, but think of another B word there. And then getting into the Orica, and he won his second race in it with, I mean, with some help, of course. You don't just go as a bronze driver win a WEC race, but still, it's the Orica has been the car that has been the best, most neutral car for the amateurs.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other major stories that you want to touch on? While we're talking about Racing Team Netherlands, they ran into trouble. They had a suspension failure after making contact with the number 51 AF Corsa Ferrari in the latter part of the circuit. I think that was Job van Uitert who was behind the wheel, and he was well torn up about the damage and how that affected the team. So not a great day for them. They lost out on the Pro-Am victory, which went to Real Team Racing, which is a pretty decent result for them. They finished 6 laps off the pace in LMP2 overall, but to still take home a Pro-Am victory is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and they would definitely rub it in across the garage because they're both run by TDS.
Yes, you're right as well. That is, oh wow, I forgot about that. Oh boy. Oh, that must make it hurt all the more for Van Oyster. Did you see that interview that he gave almost immediately after getting out of the car?
Yeah,
he was
I
distraught.
Just wanted to give him a hug.
Yeah, I mean, with appropriate social distancing measures and everything. But yeah, you just wanted to give him a hug. He's still a very young guy. I keep forgetting he's only 21 or something like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh man. What was I doing when I was 20? What were you doing when you were 21, Ollie?
You don't want to know.
Okay, we'll leave that well enough alone. Something that did come out of the LMP2 race at Portimao was a few comments from a few drivers throughout the field, most notably James Collado, who made a very pointedly worded, was it an Instagram post or a tweet? Describing
I think it was an Instagram and tweet. It was both, yeah.
Yeah. Describing the actions and driving behaviors of one of the LMP2 drivers as being problematic. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was certainly not flattering for one of the drivers. Here it is. I've found it. So after a bit of thought, there was an LMP2 Am driver yesterday racing with GTs, pretty much destroying the majority of the GT racing. He was completely dangerous, and frankly, I don't even know how he has a racing license. There's a few other things that he made there, but this was circulated around through Collado's social channels and was retweeted or liked or whatever you do on those platforms nowadays by a few of the other drivers in GT. We're pretty the comments that have come out afterwards point, and also the performance throughout the race point to these comments being made in relation to Miro Konopka, who's driver of the AFC Bratislava car. How much validity do you give to these comments by Collado and that have been supported by the GTE field based on your interpretations of the race and what we saw on track? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Well, Konopka, he's pretty slow. Okay, that's just how it is. In P2 racing, he's been doing it for a while now, and I remember watching at Le Mans maybe 2018, maybe, and he started the race and was well off the back of the P2 field and only just in front of the GTE-Pro field at Le Mans, where there's a lot of straight lines where you just sit at full throttle and be easily faster than the GTs. So at a circuit like Le Mans, where he's only just a bit faster than the GTs on a clear track, it's kind of a bit embarrassing. And that was when P2s were faster than they are now. So, yeah, he in a P2 car, he does the lap times around about of the GT Pro cars. And what makes that more dangerous is the fact that the P2 is going to be overtaking on the straight, and then into the corner, because of his talent, he's going to be driving slower. So you get this kind of rubber band elastic crossover of cars, and that's where it becomes dangerous. And that's what we talked about with the stratification kind of overlap. So yeah, it's a bit awkward.
A bit awkward to say the least. And we did see throughout the race. Firstly, the OC Bratislava car brought out the safety car by beaching it at turn 8. So that's not really a big feather in the cap for that car to start with. But they also had contact with the Glickenhaus through turn 3 at one stage, made contact with another GT car at least once, caught on camera. And to support your point about, lap times and stratification, etc., of the entire LMP2 field, the 3 drivers for the ARC Bratislava car. So it's not just Konopka we're concerned about here in this context, but also Oliver Webb and Thomas Jackson. They were 3 of the lowest 6 drivers in. Of the lowest 6, they were 3 of them, if that makes sense. That's not a good way of phrasing it, but I'm going to stick with that anyway. And Konopka was almost a second slower than anyone else in a P2 car. So that is problematic. Now, let's just ignore Konopka for a second. We have seen amateur drivers be slow and be, I don't want to say problematic, but
sketchy.
Be sketchy. We'll use that word for now. In GTE classes, in LMP2 classes for, a number of years at Le Mans and at other racetracks. Satoshi Hoshino was involved in that incident with the Corvette a few years ago, and he ended up pulling out of the race, which meant that his car was pulled out of the race. That's we said at the time that maybe that's something that the driver needs to sort of measure up and see how he feels before the event. We've seen, I think it was last year, one of the Eurasia drivers who finished the race in P2. Who am I thinking of? Nobuya Yamashita. We were saying that he was not a liability on track, but something very closely approaching it. Now, does there need to be a more stringent duty of care by the series itself in ensuring that a certain a certain minimum standard is met by all the drivers, so that way there aren't any safety concerns or reduced safety concerns? Is that something that falls on the series to ensure that they police?
Yeah. So the series operating the race, they have a duty of care, I suppose, to the cars and the entries, and part of that is driving standards. And the way that it works is the bronze driver rating is kind of like a catch-all of anyone under a certain level, and therefore that includes some the kind of lowest rung of racing standard. It can be a bit awkward, and I think this is an example of it being awkward, but it's difficult to police. Maybe you could only do it reactionary, but after you've had these sorts of races, how do you prove to someone before they've raced that they're not good enough? Do you do simulator time? Like, you have to do simulators as a rookie at Le Mans to prove that you're safe? Maybe, but who pays for that? Do you risk cancelling a team entry because he's the one bringing the team, he's the one bringing the budget?
Yeah.
How do you sacrifice?
And he's bringing Algarve as well, which is the only non-Orica in the WEC now that the Dallara of Cetilar is gone.
Yeah, and you want to you want to be inclusive of people that are willing to put that budget up, especially in a financial situation that we have right now. So you want to be inclusive for those sorts of entrants, and it's a fine line between pissing those people off. But on the other hand, if he's not safe, then, and he himself is not pulling himself out, like you mentioned with Hoshino and Tracy Crone, who is not doing those kinds of races anymore, because he's just not that level. If you aren't going to self-police, then the series should step in and say, hey, you need to be at this standard. You aren't at this standard. We will accommodate you in our lower series where you can improve. Like, for example, ELMS.
Yep.
He's perfectly able to run his car in ELMS. Yeah, I think that's maybe the steps that they could take.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if you are listening and wondering if we're taking a very hard line here, we're not saying anything about this particular driver as a person. We're just commenting on what has been said and what has been understood, I guess, in the fallout of this event. And it would be different if it was just one driver saying it, but the fact that it's been supported by a number of other drivers kind of points to a bigger issue here. And for example, I know that at the Nürburgring, you're not allowed to just step into a GT3 car and race a NLS race or the Nürburgring 24. You must do a number of races in lower category machinery in order to prove that you are at the appropriate standard to run an NLS race at that level. So it is. Yeah, it's something I don't think people to think we're being unfair or unjust in this assessment. This is just what has been said external to us, and what might be the processes that they have in place. This. Let's not forget, this isn't Canopter's. Let's focus on Canopter in particular. This isn't his first time in an LMP2 car either. He's raced in the previous iteration of LMP2 in the World Endurance Championship and in ELMS and at Le Mans. So it's interesting that these comments are coming out now with this iteration, to me at least. Maybe that's because he's had some time away from an LMP2 machine in the WEC. I don't know. Again, this is something that maybe we can tag here and come back to in a few months and see what the conversation has gotten to at that point. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
It's just Collado complaining. He likes doing that, doesn't he?
He does like complaining. He didn't have too much to complain about, though. We'll talk about the GTE-Pro race now. He didn't have too much to complain about. Taking a class win on his birthday as well. For AF Corsa.
Aww.
Yeah, right. What a lucky bugger. At least that's what I thought. I heard James Collado that it was his birthday over the weekend of the race. So yeah, 13th of June. So happy birthday, James. You got a nice brand new trophy to go home with you as well. And it was a commanding victory from the AF Corsa machines of the Ferrari 488s of Pierguidi and Collado, which surprised me particularly considering Porsche's outright pace in qualifying. But man, those left rear tires just did not have a good time at Portimao.
Yeah, they minced them up, the Porsches.
Absolutely.
Whoops.
And right from the very beginning as well.
Yeah, not so good. They had trouble trying to keep them alive, and they had some stints where they just completely fell apart, and they had to limp around to avoid pitting early to then need an extra stop because of the fuel.
And as it happened, one of them had to anyway. The number 91 Porsche, the Jimmy Bruni and Michael Christensen car, that had the issue. Sorry, Jimmy Bruni, Ricard Leitz, and Fred McElreckie car rather. That had the issue early on where Bruni torched the tire in the first stint, and they had to come in. They had to come in way early, and so they were forced to make an additional stop. And even with the safety car playing them back into the mix later on the race, they still finished a lap down on the Ferrari.
Yes, and like we mentioned with the Glickenhaus, maybe something they can or cannot fix for Monza. So it might look the same again, where they might have the outright qualifying pace, but then on the long runs, and when you're trying to double stint tyres, they start falling apart when you've got the Curva Grande, Parabolica, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the Lesmos, yeah. Now, why was it only happening to the Porsches? I mean, you know, it happened to the Glickenhaus, happened to the Porsche and GTE-Am as well. But why in GTE-Pro? Why only the Porsches? What? Any theories?
Well, you've got the different factors. So you've got the factor of the inherent car design itself, and the way that the weight is situated around the car. But then that comes into the second point in terms of the setup of the suspension. So to make their car fast, they'll have specific suspension setups, cambers, that sort of thing. And maybe one of those parameters that they need to have set to a specific range is different to where Ferrari set up their suspension. And it's seemed to work in terms of making the car fast, but not work in terms of making the car fast for a long time.
Keeping the tyre alive, yeah. Is that, I like, off the top of my head, something I'll say is a major contributing factor is the weight distribution, the fact that the Porsche has the weight over that rear. Do you think that might induce a bit more sliding and a bit more pain for that left rear tyre, especially through those long loaded corners?
Well, I don't think so much, because remember the GTE Porsche layout, they've flipped
it's mid rear, yeah, but it's effectively on the rear tires.
Well, it's in front of the rear tires, just like how a 488 engine is in front of the tires, the rear tires.
Yeah, whatever.
I think also maybe it could be an aerodynamic setup. So take, for example, if you trim out the rear wing to get the top speed to try and pass on the long straight, you maybe induce a bit of oversteer. And so if you have too much oversteer on the rear axle, you're going to get some sliding. You get the sliding, you get the overheating of the surface temperature of the tyre. But on the other hand, it could be the case that if you have too much downforce, then you have a lot of load going through the tyre, and it potentially overheats that way as well. So there's kind of this fine line of where you position the setup of your car to kind of hit the sweet spot, and they missed.
Yeah, and they missed by a long way, and it was clear from the outset that they were going to be in tyre drama for the entire race, and as it happens, they were. So that was kind of the defining story of GTE-Pro. Question mark. Fortunately, it got lost in the other classes. I think the 4-car class has made it very difficult to sort of pop, so to speak, especially when GTE-Am was as crazy as it was. And oh my god, GTE-Am, it was a beautiful, beautiful sight for me to see the Cetilar racing team in that beautiful chrome blue Ferrari 488 take a victory in their Italian machine. They were absolutely over the moon. They were in tears of joy after that race, and it was so wholesome to see them so happy, because they worked so hard in that Dallara for so long to get anywhere, and they finally were able to move to an Italian car that actually had a chance at winning. And I didn't expect it to take 2 races for them to be on the top step of the podium, and that was awesome. Sure, they got a little bit of help from other factors, but let's just focus on Cetilar for the first part. They were awesome. That was so awesome. That's exactly what the GTE-Am class is about.
Are you part Italian by any chance?
Nah, not even a little bit. What makes you say that?
Just checking.
Okay. Full disclosure, I have Italian.
You're going to play the card.
Huh?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
play
exactly.
Play that card.
But like, I'm a Porsche fan. I care much more about Porsches winning races than I do about Ferraris winning races. But I do love the passion of the Italians, and like particularly Roberto Lacorte. His emotion in the interview afterwards. You could not wipe the smile from his face or the tears from his eyes. He was just absolutely over the moon.
Yeah, it's brilliant. For those that don't know, they have a movie of them racing at Le Mans with the Dallara. What's it called? Spirit of Le Mans?
The Italian Spirit of Le Mans.
There we go. Recommend watch it.
Recommend both of them. First one and the second one.
Yes, they're brilliant.
Yes.
It really highlights their passion. And yeah, it's wholesome. It's the kind of little team that could. Well, now they're with AF Corsa, so now they're not a little team.
Well,
Anyway,
I mean, even when they were running the Dallara, they were with AF Corsa. AF Corsa were running that thing.
Only for a year.
It still counts.
Last year.
It still counts, and like, yeah, okay, whatever. But still, like, they had to be on the money, and to beat as Lecorte as a bronze driver, to beat out the likes of Perfetti, to beat out the likes of Dallalana, Ben Keating, who, by the way, had a shocking race, just quietly for Ben. That was really unfortunate. And Christian Reed, who has won like all of the ELMS races at Portimao ever. That they had to go out and win this race, and they absolutely did. And so I'm very, very happy for them. In fact, that was the part of the race I was most excited by come the end of it.
Yeah, it was a real feel-good story. Quite a lot of their biggest competitors had quite embarrassing problems. We've mentioned here the 83 car, the AF Corsa Ferrari, that's kind of the favourites going into each round. At the first stint, they had a tyre failure, front right, and can't remember. I think another Ferrari had the same kind of failure, the front right, and that took them out of contention. It would have been nice for them to be as part of the fight as well.
Yeah,
there we go.
So that was with Perotto behind the wheel, and I think I think that was due to contact, if I remember correctly. I think that was due to contact with a car as they were being lapped. Because at that point in time, Perotto was engaged in a battle with Christian Reed. I remember that much, in the number 77 car, and the number 83 car just kind of fell apart in one corner, and it came out that it was a tire deflation, which ended up dropping them 5 or 6 laps back, because they had the whole fender and the fairing and the suspension that they had to replace. And after their incredible run at Spa-Francorchamps, it was very much a shock to the entire paddock that they had such a bad run right at the very beginning. But it wasn't only them who ran into trouble, or rather had trouble run into them. The Dempsey Proton racing car of Christian Reed, Jackson Evans, and Matt Campbell, and the D-Station Racing Aston Martin, the number 777, Tomonobu Fuji behind the wheel at the time, they got caught up with the Glickenhaus incident. The 709 crashed into both of them, forcing both of their retirements. And they're two quite big teams in the GTE-Am ranks, Dempsey Proton and D-Station, and AF Corsa for that matter. So to have them all out of the mix, it was an open opportunity that someone had to take. They'll put it that way.
Yeah, and you got to take the opportunities that you get, especially in a field that's so competitive as this. It was a bit of a shame that these events robbed the race of a closer finish, but there was still some fighting from GTE-Am pretty much all the way through the race. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Fighting at the front were Team Project One and the other AF Corsa car, the Thomas Floor, Francesco Cacciolacci, and Giancarlo Fischer-Keller car. They were the ones in the mix come the end of the race. That 56 car, one of the cars very close to the end of the race, it was the car, the number 54 car, was given a very late penalty for speeding... not reducing their speed for the full course yellow, the late full course yellow that we had due to the stranded high class car with about 25 minutes left. So that kind of they picked up a drive through for that, but that wouldn't have been enough for the 54 car to have taken the victory. What it did do is it did let the pressure off the Cetilar car, and even with the number 56 car, Egidio Perfetti, Matteo Cairoli, and Riccardo Pera charging them down, they were able to be in a good enough position to get to the end with 6 seconds in hand. So a very, very wholesome result for them. Interesting that the GTE-Am Porsches didn't suffer the same problems as the GTE-Pro Porsches in terms of the aggressive tyre wear. Any particular insights as to why that might be? GTE-Am cars are allowed extra sets of tyres, right? That's yeah, that would be right.
Yeah, they have more tyres to play with, and worse drivers. So compared to GTE-Pro, so part of that is cause and effect. Like they're given extra tyres because they're more likely to burn through them.
Yeah.
But the better teams are going to say, okay, we've got better drivers than everyone else, so we're going to run these tyres closer to the edge of performance and then just change them each time and just fresh tyres, push.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was an interesting race in GTE-Am, and a very happy result in the end. The thing that I just want to say, as we close off this discussion on the Portimao race, how good has GTE-Am been the last few seasons? Like,
especially the first stints.
Yeah, it's been
just this
door banging. It's something.
Yeah, I think having majority have the bronzes in at the start, but then some teams sprinkle in a little extra by having a pro driver or a silver driver in it. You have that sort of slight imbalance. So instead of just having the bronze train just lapping behind each other and kind of weird risky moves because they're bronzes and they're not going to take those risks, but then you add someone who's more capable, like the Jackson Evans or the Tomonobu Fuji started the race in the D station. It kind of adds that little extra where you get the overtakes, which then disrupts, and you get the kind of imbalances in driver talent, which kind of adds a little extra spice. He kind of effed it up a bit because he went through his front right tyre and got a puncture, I think because he was locking up so much, which is a bit embarrassing from one of your better drivers on paper.
Is that Fuji? Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, GTE-Am is brilliant, and they're going to be a huge grid at Monza.
Oh, it's going to be awesome because, of course, the Monza round for the WEC, which will be the next round on the 18th of July, so about a month away as we are recording this podcast now. That's going to be the week after the ELMS round there as well, so a lot of teams will just... I'm expecting a lot of teams to just double up and say, okay, we're here anyway, we might as well put a car in for the WEC race, especially if we're going to Le Mans, because this is going to give us extra testing, extra competition time, and extra time to work on our straight line performance. And by the way, thank you for jogging my memory. Perotto also had that massive lock up in turn 1, which is why the tyre ended up going on him as well. I've got to say, going from when I first started watching the WEC back in 2013, 2014, where GTE-Am was 4 or 5 cars and it wasn't all that interesting because there wasn't really that much focus or that much intrigue around it because no one cared, to where we are now, where we have, double-digit figure cars and a great smattering of personalities and stories and, people that we are interested in seeing how they race and seeing how they go. I think that the focus from the series and the return of the drivers and the personalities, bringing that to the fore, that has been a really, really good thing to see. And like the fact that some of our favorite, as in the community's favorite drivers, are bronze drivers who have these really loud and brilliant personalities. I think that's something that is unique to sports car racing at the top level, and something that I really, really enjoy, and something that makes watching these races, even if they are, they do fall into lulls sometimes, it just makes them great to watch. So that's my spiel on GTE-Am. Any other comments about the race in Portimao before we take a quick break?
Watch it.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
If you missed it, you can watch it already. They've been posting the races 3 days after the race. So, yeah, go ahead and watch it. And a final note as well. native radio commentary on the app. Thoughts?
Right. On Saturday, I couldn't watch, but I could listen. It was a bit harder to follow in just as a radio product because they are dedicated to being commentary for a video feed, but it's better than not following. So yeah, it was great.
Nice, fantastic. I have the
really
same.
well.
I have the same opinion. I'm glad that it is something that you can do now because, like, honestly, throughout some of the 24-hour races, throughout Le Mans, maybe not Le Mans for me personally, but I can see it being a use case for other people that they just need to get out of the house sometimes and just having it on as a bit of a walking track. I think that would be a great plan. So that was Portimao. We're going to take a quick break here. We've got a little bit more coming up after the break, and then we'll wrap it all up. If you're following plenty of motorsport series like I do, you've probably run into trouble with calendars, time zone conversions, and most importantly, missing the start of the racing you want to watch. That's why I use the Racing Line app. The Racing Line is your customizable motorsport calendar, giving you up-to-date schedules on all the racing you care about with all major motorsport series covered. Use the day or week view to check out what's on and plan for those busy weekends ahead. The Racing Line allows you to set customizable notifications for events, giving you enough time to get yourselves ready for the racing you want to watch, or for me to get the race threads ready. Plus, it's all converted into your local time zone, so there's no getting caught out by bad mental maths or daylight saving changes around the world. Find out more at theracingline.app or search The Racing Line on the iOS store. Thank you to The Racing Line for sponsoring this podcast. Welcome back to part 2 of this Endurance Chat episode. Still here with Oliver Troivus, and we're going to be updating everyone on where we stand with LMH and LMDh because a lot has happened this year. Of course, as we're getting closer to convergence and to the 100th anniversary of the Le Mans 24 Hours, we are getting more and more news pretty much as fast as the racing is coming at us. And of course, we can barely keep up with the racing as it is. So we'll give everyone a bit of an update on where we stand, who we're expecting, who is committed, who is uncommitted, and yeah, where everything stands heading into the next few seasons. So Ollie, where do we want to start?
Okay, so since our last episode, one of the biggest tidbits of news
a big tidbit.
would be... Well, BMW.
Yes.
So they have announced that they will be committing to LMDh. I think their Instagram, the Instagram image or the press release image was Daytona 2023, which will be their first race potentially.
Yes.
They, which then, commits them towards prioritizing IMSA. There's still unknown whether they'll do a WEC program or if anyone will pick up a BMW to do a WEC program, but it hasn't been ruled out. It's just them saying they're going to Daytona, so they're going to do IMSA. It was kind of really clunkily done.
Yes.
So it was leaked, or it was on the Instagram story or the Instagram page of the CEO of BMW M division before the rest of the company announced it. So it was kind of all a bit crazy. And, is this real? Is it not real? Can we trust this person's Instagram account? That sort of thing. But then it was finally confirmed. Yeah, this should be good. Having BMW a top name in top brand in sports car history coming back. Hopefully that means that they'll be coming to Le Mans. That's not confirmed, but
yes,
you would think that an OEM with a lot of size in Europe would be doing that sort of thing. On the other hand, BMW Team RLL, when they had the GTE-Am program in America, they didn't come over to Le Mans into the GTE-Pro category.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a seesaw of will they, won't they come over the pond, but you'd think fighting for overall top class honours is worth making the trip.
Yeah, absolutely, and at Le Mans. And let's not forget, BMW has history at Le Mans as well. They did win the event in 1999, I think.
2001.
No, that was definitely
2001?
Audi. Audi won in 2001, 2, and 3. And yeah, because it was 1999, because that was the year that the GR010, or GR, no, sorry,
Blew a tyre.
the Toyota, TS020. Far out. It's too late for this stuff. When the tire blew up with 20 minutes left and Bill Auberlen crashed into him. That was that year. So they've definitely won at Le Mans before, and you'd have to expect them to go back to Le Mans. Like, that's a no-brainer. If you have the car to do it, that fits the regulations, like, why wouldn't you? What this does mean, though, is that we have, I think, if you look at Le Mans for the last 30 years, you have the only manufacturers who are the only winning manufacturers who will be missing will be Bentley from 2003 and McLaren from 1995. Every other win at Le Mans will be featured on the grid for the 2023 Le Mans with BMW's announcement, which is pretty damn cool for the last 30 years.
Yeah, I was thinking, geez, when's Bugatti coming then? But
No. They're as ridiculous as that would be. No, that's definitely a pipe dream.
Yes, I think it's brilliant in terms of the cynic kind of view is if there are too many OEMs celebrating an anniversary, then there will be good balance of performance because they've all equally got something to fight for.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a great point. That's a great point. If everyone's politically invested, then they're going to get good balance of performance.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, well, I'm celebrating my win from 20 years ago. Oh, well, I'm celebrating my win from 15 years ago. Oh, well, I'm celebrating my win from 100 years ago. Well,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a brilliant...
And then you got Ferrari that's hardly won anything in a long time.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So great way that, like, once they actually figured out that this was the real deal, I think it's really, really cool that they had the race winning car from 99 as their, release image. People were asking whether or not that's a render, but that was actually a photo shoot done with that specific car. So cool to see BMW committed. What we know about the program so far is that it's, as you said, Ollie, confirmed for IMSA predominantly, not confirmed for WEC or Le Mans as of yet. And it's the expectation of the journalists in the know that it will be the Dallara chassis that they'll use to build that LMDh off of, but that is as of yet unconfirmed. So yeah, another big name in the mix. So that can only be good news.
Yes, and hopefully they will get the budget together to race in Europe and in the World Endurance Championship, because that would then lock them in for turning up and having the brand represented at Le Mans.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else has recently been making waves in the upcoming prototype department? I think Peugeot have been the other one of extreme note in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so Peugeot announced that they'll be unveiling their car next month. So in 3 weeks' time. On the 6th of July, they'll be unveiling their new car. And hopefully it'll be pretty. We'll see.
That's the dream.
Yeah, and we're expecting the livery to kind of be black with kind of acid yellow highlights, which is kind of their Peugeot Sport electrification kind of angle that they're going with. Maybe they'll have all the drivers there as well. So yeah, that's a nice little thing to boost of confidence before Le Mans.
Yeah, and of course, that is going to be a car that is going to be competing next season as well. So we're going to be seeing that 7, 8, 9, 10 months before it's actually going to be on track in anger.
Yeah, and part of that is having loads of testing time. The car will probably change since the unveiling, just adding little details, just tweaking setup and things like that. So maybe little aero tweaks. The chances are this car will just be a model.
Yeah.
And might not even have an interior. It might be made of clay, that sort of thing. So things might still change. It might be the case that it's kind of like a livery reveal on a model car, a full-scale model car. But it's still something that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And keep in mind as well that it is, as an LMH, going to be subject to a 5-year homologation. So the longer they can delay that locking in process, the more testing they can do, the more adjustments they can make. So yeah, don't expect this to be the absolute final. But it is exciting that we're going to get to see it before Le Mans proper. I think that's actually very cool. I wonder, had Le Mans not been delayed, would they have tried to do the reveal at Le Mans and try to steal the show twice in a row?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard, the drivers for that program has been announced, and that was announced some time ago. Just to reiterate that, it's going to be Paul di Resta, Loic Duval, Mikkel Jensen, Kevin Magnussen, Gustavo Menezes, and Jean-Eric Verne. And I think there's also a notable reserve driver whose name escapes me at the moment as well. So looking at that list, that's what, like 4 people with former Formula 1 talent, and then also Gustavo Menezes, who was a feeder series driver, as well as Mikkel Jensen, who's been tearing it up in LMP3, LMP2, and GTE now for the past 2 or 3, 4 seasons. So that's a pretty cool lineup, and I'm especially excited to see Mikkel Jensen in that car.
Yeah, the just a super high level view, the new regulations puts more emphasis on the drivers, so you were going to see some really good driver lineups from these teams.
Yeah. Where should we go next in our journey through LMH and LMDh?
VAG is kind of an elephant in the room.
Yeah, so let's talk about what we know with VAG. So Porsche and Audi, we know, are committed. We know, or at least that we're expecting, that they're going to be running LMDh machines starting from 2023 using a Multimatic chassis based out of the States. And that has been confirmed, as a VAG exclusive deal. So they're going to only VAG companies are going to be able to use the Multimatic. That's at least what we're expecting. Both Porsche and Audi are rumored to be using the same, if not very similar, V8 engines. Maybe a Cayenne derivative for Porsche, or Audi have been confirmed with a twin-turbo V8. That's not the DTM engine. And then, of course, we've heard that Penske is going to be back and running that Porsche outfit. But what about the other VAG brands? What about, say Bentley or Lamborghini? Any light on those yet?
So Lamborghini had a sort of concept stage with Dallara, which was shelved when the VAG group moved to Multimatic and kind of consolidated all onto one. And it looks like they've kind of got an exclusivity with Multimatic in terms of filling up Multimatic's production capacity.
Yeah, okay.
Just to rewind, did you say Multimatic were from the States?
I said based in the States, because that's the old Riley. They absorbed Riley, right? And they're running the IMSA programs.
Maybe some Canadians might be angry in the audience.
Sorry, North America. It's all the same to me. It's on the other side of the world.
Yeah, it's a nation state.
That's like differentiating between New Zealand and Australia. We're all just basically one big happy family over here, aren't we? Aren't we, Kiwi?
Yeah.
Don't ever say that while we're playing each other in a sporting event. Otherwise,
it's an island off Australia, mainland Australia, like Tasmania.
Just a completely unrelated sidebar. Did you know that there is a problem in world maps or in like map features that New Zealand just gets completely omitted?
Doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Doesn't exist.
to the point where there's an entire subreddit dedicated to maps without New Zealand. It's great.
It's a part of an imagination. Yeah, it's fake.
It's basically Narnia. That's why they filmed all those fantasy movies there, right?
There we go.
Anyway, sorry. So based in North America, not the States. Based in North America.
Lamborghini.
Yes, Lamborghini.
There's a question mark over what they're doing. They could do it. I think they will do it. It's the how costly it would be to rebadge a Audi or a Porsche Multimatic chassis, just have a nose swap. Everything's going to be the same, the engine, that sort of thing. They would just need to make sure that the aerodynamics isn't ruined, but hopefully they do a bit more than just a badge swap on the front end. And the same was potentially going to happen with Bentley. So it would be the case where a customer who's part of the Bentley family, whether that be a team like M Sport who have operated and designed the Bentley GT3s, or a paying customer who has a connection with the Bentley brand who wants to operate a Bentley program, they potentially didn't want to spend to rehomologate a car with the Bentley badge, which would cost a lot of money, several million. So maybe that entry with Bentley, which is now stopped and not happening, that would mean that there's going to be a VAG Pro-Am or a VAG customer or privateer car instead. So hopefully there's still an entry there linked to that idea. But it's just not going to be a different car, a different OEM.
Yeah.
So Lamborghini's still not ruled out. I think there's potential there. But I think in terms of the VAG brand, I think it will be Porsches, Audis, maybe Lamborghinis. But there should be customer cars, hopefully, as part of the VAG shebang. Yeah.
And on your note about Lamborghini and the rebadging, it's not anything new that VAG is doing there. I mean, the Lamborghini Huracan in GT3 currently runs the same V10 as the Audi R8 in GT3. Same chassis, yeah. Literally the only thing that's different on those cars is the shell, the bodywork, which, sorry if we ruined some illusions of differences there, I guess. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just cheaper. It's just cheaper to make them all the same. I mean, they're still very, very good cars, regardless. Who else? We saw Acura announce an LMDh program earlier in the year. I think that was back at February, so around the same time as the Sebring 12 hours. Have we heard anything more about the Acura program?
So Wayne Taylor Racing moving from the Caddy DPI to Acura kind of is a statement of intent in terms of running Acura LMDHs, or at least one. And Wayne has been pretty vocal about his intentions of going to Le Mans, whether that be them doing some stuff in WEC or just trying to be invited from one of the IMSA teams going to France. We'll wait and see. Hopefully there'll be a WEC program with them running under the Honda brand rather than Acura.
Yep.
Acura is more of an American thing. Maybe Meyer Shank Racing as well. After coming off that Indy 500 win, the chances of them getting sponsorships higher.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing because as far as I'm aware, since they made the announcement, there has not been a peep of additional news. There was one article which had an interview with someone involved the team on Sportscar 365 that said basically nothing, truth be told. But there's Wayne Taylor Racing in the mix. There's Maya Shank in the past. Who else has been running Acuras? Someone else has been running Acuras at quite a high level. So it's interesting to me that there's not been anything more that's been said beyond, yes, this is happening. So I'm not even sure what chassis they're gonna go with. Maybe the Orica, considering they're already running the Orica now. That's
the intention.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks around that program as it stands at the minute. So it's interesting to me that you've specifically pointed out Wayne Taylor's desire to race at Le Mans, and so I think, yeah, considering he's moved that entire program from the Cadillac over to the Acura, that would not surprise me then to see them make that journey. Who else from the States, from the IMSA side of things, from North America, do we have any information about? I think Mazda has been a firm no.
Yeah, Mazda are stopping their operations. This may be because of the VAG Multimatic kind of exclusivity. Yep. It's a shame. They've got a long history, and they were kind of the only ones that did DPI interestingly.
Yeah.
They were the only ones that actually cared about changing the aesthetic of the LMP2, whereas the other ones kind of phoned it in.
That's being
GM.
kind.
Yeah, GM, General Motors, are pretty much there's the most open secret with bringing an LMDh racing, probably just primarily in the States. Hopefully they'll do customer cars like the way that they operate with the DPIs now, but that's expected to be a carrying on. There's no idea with who they're running. Probably staying with Dallara again, and keeping that connection going. But hopefully, the announcement comes soon. They were expected to do an announcement at Belle Isle, which is their home IMSA race, but it's kind of all a bit silent there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, their DPI was announced in like November. Before the first race, which was Daytona in January. So,
and if I recall correctly, that was also after months and months and months and months and months of speculation, rumors, open secrets, etc., etc.
Yeah, so we can kind of expect GM, they're going to do it. As for anyone else in America, I think that's pretty much it.
Well, what about the other programs that we know of that over in Europe? So, of course, we know Toyota. Toyota's going to be there. They're already there. So, that's a no-brainer. Glickenhaus is also there currently. But there's I would love to see a more firm commitment to doing the WEC races from Jim. So, he has said a few times this year, it does not make commercial sense for us to go to Bahrain or to Fuji. We will go if someone sponsors us, otherwise we're not going to go. And to me, it's a bit shit. Like, that's not what you want to be hearing from your, LMH competitor that's worked so hard to get a car on the grid. It is a bit of a cop-out. It's probably, entirely correct. It's probably not going to be something that makes them money. It's probably going to cost quite a fair bit for not a lot of return on investment. They're not selling cars in those markets. That's fine. But bro, right?
Yeah, it's a bit shit.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bit of a dick move. You would also say that they're more likely to get a good result in this season compared to next season when Peugeot's probably going to beat them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you might as well sink some more cost now and then in future take that sacrifice. I can kind of see where he's coming from, because I think after Fuji, if Fuji even goes ahead, which is a doubt, they would need to air freight the car, everything, rather than sea freight, which adds a lot of cost to get back to the next round. But yeah, it's a bit awkward.
Yeah, it is a bit awkward. I'd love to see a more firm, more direct commitment to doing the rest of the season, because honestly, a 3-round WEC program is a bit shit. And as much as I don't want to say loved Glickenhaus, I don't really love the project. I haven't fallen in love with it, but as much as I respect what they're doing, as much as I am intrigued by their progress and very much interested in the way that they're going about being open and vocal on social media, and getting themselves in a bit of hot water sometimes. Like, did you see their tweet at Toyota after practice in Portimao? So for those out of the loop, there was a video posted by the official FIA WEC Twitter showing an onboard lap on board the Glickenhaus, wherein it spent the entire lap behind the Toyota. And so Toyota Gazoo Racing tweeted, "Oh yeah, follow us, we'll show you the way." And then after eclipsing the Toyotas in free practice 3, Jim just replied with a screenshot of the timing results. Of course, when they got to qualifying and then got to the race and they were a few seconds off the pace, that came back to bite them. But like, hey, I love that. I love that sort of abject arrogance. I think it's great for the sport. I'd love to see that arrogance met with a commitment to being arrogant for another few rounds.
He can't but regardless, he can't back up those words.
Yeah,
because he's just getting spanked, and you say, "Oh, bigging up yourself after being a 10th faster in practice, and then in the race being a second slower." It's like, come on, then.
Yeah, get it together.
You put your money where your mouth is, but also show us what you're talking about
on track. Yeah,
and that's yet to happen. But another thing is they were talking about potential sales of the Glickenhaus into potential GTE-Am or LMP2 teams that are willing to step up to the top class. Glickenhaus, he's pretty vocal about how cheap his platform costs, even compared to a LMDh, which is there for lower costs.
Yeah.
In the first place, and even taking the Glickenhaus chassis and putting a different body on it is possible. So there may be more potential in doing something like that. But to be honest, if another LMH constructor is willing to sell their car for customers, wouldn't you rather, if you're actually a proper customer, that's willing to fight for wins rather than take part, you wouldn't necessarily go with the Glickenhaus because we're yet to be convinced by its performance.
Yeah, like taking this conversation 15 years ago, I'd rather buy an Audi than a Dyson.
Oof.
Yeah, and you can tell Chris that yourself. Speaking of LMH and possible customers, of course we had Ferrari get confirmed earlier in the year as a return for 2023 with the LMH. So that is a very big throwback in terms of their sports car commitment. The last time they raced at Le Mans was 1973, I think. I want to say that off the top of my head, the 312 PB.
Yep.
And then there was that brief stint in IMSA where they were running the 333 SP. So to see them back with a full WEC top class effort, that's going to be very, very cool. Like, this is just, a wet dream for sports car fans. You got Porsche, you got Audi, you got Ferrari, you got Peugeot. These are like the all the big names in sports car history all at once.
Yeah, it's going to bring a lot of eyes on. Having experienced what drivers can do to attendance at Le Mans in terms of changing demographics, the same thing's going to happen with Ferrari. It's going to bring loads of people to the sport, and it's going to explode.
It's going to explode. So who else then? Who else is? Who else are we missing? Who are the dream teams that we're missing? Just I know this isn't on the run sheet, and I'm going to throw this one completely out of the woodworks, but you said teams and drivers changing the demographics. What about Jaguar? Remember, well, I mean, of course you don't remember the glory days, the 80s in Group C, where like 40 million friggin' Brits came across the pond in their silk-cut Jag tops to go to Le Mans and watch them get spanked by Porsche mostly. Has Jaguar been mentioned at all? Does Jaguar even exist?
I have no idea who's going to pay for it, because it probably wouldn't be Jaguar themselves.
Exactly.
Aren't
they part of VAG?
No.
No, not anymore.
They're owned by Tata.
Okay. So,
yeah, they were in a bit of financial difficulty, to say the least, over the pandemic.
Yes.
It's kind of like the whole Aston Martin style thing, where they were running out of money as well. Jaguar Land Rover together as a group. They are a little stuck at the moment. I don't think they would be willing to do that.
So we basically ruled out all the British or English teams then. So no garagistas from the British Isles. What about McLaren? That's one. They've got an active GT3 program.
Are they New Zealanders then?
I mean, well, I kind of got I got 3/4 of the way through that sentence and then realised that there was one that we'd missed. I mean, New Zealand would probably claim them.
Yeah, exactly. They're the most vocal that haven't actually done anything. So they've been vocal all the way through the start, pre-convergence, and at the start of defining what Le Mans Hypercar is or would be or is now, without actually putting anything on the table. They were the reason for, alongside Aston Martin, for doing the road-derived hypercar angle, because that was what the plan was going to be, having a road-derived hypercar that was yet to be unveiled. But then the pandemic, the business ran out of money before the pandemic anyway. But I digress. Yes, that didn't happen. So then LMDh kind of offered another angle to be able to run for much less cost. That has yet to happen. Because the company's still out of money. They sold the building, so they generated a bit of cash. But in my opinion, that's to pay off a lot of debt rather than actually put cash towards anything new. I think this partly needs to have some backing from someone or somewhere to get running. But I think there's an option there of doing something with Ligier. There is the connection that Zach Brown behind McLaren and also United Autosports, they have the connection with Ligier in terms of connection.
Yes.
Well, no, they're still the European agent for selling Ligier cars, so they are still working with Ligier.
Okay, I it was my understanding that when the LMP2 United Autosports team, which Zach Brown is also the CEO of, moved to the Oreca, that they lost out on that part of the distribution deal as well. That was my understanding. Of course, you probably would know better than I.
So part of that was the way that United Autosports runs in terms of the amateur brings the car.
Yeah.
And so it was the amateur buying a Ligier because United Autosports was in bed with Ligier.
Yeah.
But then the amateur wanted a new car, and so the amateur bought an Oreca themselves, and then goes to United and says, look, I'm only going to be using your services if you use this car.
Yeah.
So it was awkward, but I think they still have those connections in place. We haven't really had any LMDh confirmed from using the Ligier chassis. We've only seen the Peugeot using a Ligier chassis and Ligier offering bodywork and carbon design and aerodynamic support. But that's not using the LMP2 base. That's using a custom hypercar chassis. I think there could be the opportunity of a McLaren Ligier connection, but we shall see. There's still the big question mark on money.
Yes, and as much as that is a question mark that definitely still needs to be answered, I think I will share the opinion of a lot of people when I say Zach Brown should nut up or shut up and stop peacocking around and actually put something to paper. I think that's been the biggest issue with people's perception of the McLaren program / business at the moment, is that Zach says a lot of stuff and not a lot of it has a lot of substance.
Well, the difficulty was quite a lot of when he was saying a lot of these things, there was a program behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So he could say those things.
And then the program fell apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't his fault that the automotive company was running out of money. So he's not to blame for that. And that caused the project to be shelved. So on the one hand, knowing a few things from within, he was right to be teasing when there was an LMH program at that time. It's just from the outside, it looks really shitty and awkward because he talked all the talk and then nothing happened.
Yeah.
So,
and we had the same thing when they were peacocking about a potential GTE program, and then that never happened. And then they released, what was it, a Senna GTR, which had GTE leader lights on the side of it, or something like that?
That car had GTE stickers on it 2 days before the cloth was lifted from it. They had to print an R sticker and attach it and peel off the E stickers. So
brilliant.
That car was built originally. The Senna was kind of designed to fit the GTE regulation, like the road car.
Yeah,
was kind of designed to make the best GTE base possible, and then that didn't happen last minute because there was the rumblings of running out of money.
Yeah,
at that point. So
basically, the Senna was meant to be the Ford GT of McLaren, but money.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the Senna GTR is pretty wacky and wild and cool. So
yeah, this is true. I mean, it's a GTE car. Anyway. So that's where McLaren stands. Who else? Who else is really someone who stayed quiet and hasn't really come to the fore, or hasn't really committed to anything, or has question marks around them that we'd like to see in LMDh or LMH, or at least like to hear something from?
So the first half of this podcast, we kind of talked about them quite a lot, and that's the Alpine. So Alpine, if you didn't already know, they're part of the kind of Renault group.
Yeah.
And they've recently bought a brand new Oreca chassis to be running in hypercar, as LMP1 in hypercar. That's only eligible for this season. So that car will be their main race car at Le Mans, and it shows like a statement of intent. Why would, if you weren't continuing, why would you buy a brand new car and invest so much in your team if you're just going to do it one and done? It doesn't quite line up. I mean, it's possible. It's perfectly possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't rule it out, but it shows a statement of intent. Yeah,
it's quite a significant expenditure for a car that cannot exist in the regulations beyond this season. And they've been very clear that they are not running two cars at Le Mans in the WEC at all. So the fact that they now have two chassis is a bit of a question there.
Yes. But going back to what I wrote on sportscarengineering.co.uk, shill, is with this balancing, it really shows Alpine or Senior Tech, the team running them, from the data that they'll have more than me to look at. They can then have confidence to go forward from within and say, hey, it can be possible to run an LMDh at the front of the race to be on par with an LMH. So they're the kind of fence sitters that haven't said anything publicly that are probably the closest to saying yes or convincing board members. And so that brings the massive name of Renault and Alpine or either or back to Le Mans.
Nissan, question mark. I mean, Nissan kind of exists. Nissan's motorsport programs have kind of very much diminished since that terrible 2016 Le Mans for them, but that's still part of the same group.
Yeah, so there's this Nissan, Renault and Mitsubishi alliance where they all kind of own a little bit of each other.
Yeah.
So they're kind of hand in hand, and their profits are kind of shared. So you could argue, if they do a car, if they could rebadge it as a Nissan. So you could have a Renault, you could have an Alpine, you could even have a Dacia, because Dacia are part of the Renault group. So and let's not forget, one of the Ginetta customers was Dacia.
Oh,
so
my word.
There is provenance for having this group at the top, fighting at the top, post what we have now with Alpine going into convergence. So I think it's very possible. There are rumours swirling because of this Alpine program that they've got right now. Will they go forward? There's a lot of history with Alpine at Le Mans. There's a lot of history with Renault at Le Mans. They could have one as a Renault. They could have one as an Alpine.
Yeah.
But it's the same car underneath, kind of how you've got with an Audi and a Porsche.
And let's not forget as well, back when Penske first raced the Porsche 917/30, that car had Porsche written on it and also had Audi written on it. Audi was a principal sponsor of that car. And with the efforts that Renault are making at the moment to make Alpine their specialist motorsport division, what with F1 and with I think the what else are they doing at the moment that's like very motorsport? Are they doing it in Formula E as well? Anyway, we could just see it be called a Renault Alpine, with big, beautiful blue liveries with a yellow strip on it for Renault.
Yeah, it's perfectly possible. They could do maybe offset liveries, things like that. So you could have a retro throwback, yellow, white elf kind of thing.
Dude, don't get me too excited. I can't get too excited. It's too late for that. I gotta go to bed.
Oh, and before I forget, one more. Hyundai. Okay. Yeah, they should be doing it.
They should be? Okay,
yes.
That lends credence then to this article that came up on Sportscar 365 earlier in the week from Max Angelelli, who was predicting up to 8 LMDh manufacturers by 2024. Now, we have 4 confirmed already, which are Acura, Audi, BMW, and Porsche. We're expecting GM to join that. We're expecting / supposing potentially Lamborghini. And I was trying to come up with another 2 to make that 8 figure exist, because 8 to me sounds ridiculous. But if you're saying, maybe Lamborghini and maybe Renault Alpine, maybe Hyundai, then that's 8. That's 8 manufacturers.
Yeah, it just depends which way, which at the fork in the road where you choose which regulation you build your car to, which way they're going to go. I thought Hyundai would lean more towards an LMH.
Okay.
Maybe. But then on the other hand, they might do LMDh as a stopgap before the spec hydrogen chassis from Orica and Red Bull comes together and is on the market later down the line.
Yeah.
And to do a cheaper stopgap, you might as well do an LMDh rather than do a full-blown LMH, which is more work. Let's not forget that Hyundai have done a strategic partnership with Ineos for hydrogen fuel cell tech. So there's precedent there for them to kind of align with hydrogen, and I think they're going to be, or they have been, the most behind the scenes positive about doing the hydrogen, building to the hydrogen regs and putting the money down on that. So maybe it's a wait for them for having the hydrogen cars ready, or maybe they do LMDh as a interim stopgap to prepare for a hydrogen future.
Yeah, very interesting. I'd completely forgotten about their existence, to be honest, in terms of the potential sports car finagling. So that's very, very encouraging signs. I'll be completely honest. I'm more of a waiting to LMDh than I would have preferred. I know, for me at least, part of what makes the allure of Le Mans so special and the allure of sports cars so special is the emphasis on technology and the emphasis on sustainability and the emphasis on efficiency. So I guess sustainability and efficiency is part of LMDh's cost model. So I guess that works in that respect. But I'd love to see more teams and more manufacturers commit to LMH. So it is a little disappointing to me that so many of my favorite sports car manufacturers have gone the LMDh route. But like, on the other hand, like, hot damn, like if we're seeing 8 manufacturers for 2024 LMDh alone, let alone the 5 or 4 extra LMH machines in Toyota, Glickenhaus, Peugeot, and Ferrari, like that's good enough for me. And I'm sure no sports car fan in their right mind will turn their nose up on that.
Yeah, I would have hoped more people being vocal towards LMH, because that's what I prefer. There's more development, there's more design independence, there's more individuality to these cars, but still, as an avenue or a vehicle to get, well, pun not intended, a vehicle to getting more pro drivers fighting for overall wins. That's still a good narrative.
Absolutely. And if the balanced performance works on both sides of the pond, as well as it's working currently between the grandfathered LMP1 car and the current LMH machinery, then I think we are going to be in for a great on-track product. And that to me is the thing I'm most excited about. The fact that we can see not only cool technology, not only a variety of OEMs, but also those things in conjunction with great racing. Oh, I'm sold. I'm absolutely into it. Bring it on.
So long as IMSA takes the WEC BoP system.
It might be proprietary. It might be something the ACO doesn't want to chair.
Honestly, they should, because IMSA will be a joke without it, to be honest. And
we've seen that in the past with IMSA. I didn't say that. Anyway, next round of the WEC is the 6 hours of Monza on the 18th of July. That'll be a good preview for what to expect at Le Mans, of course. Big long straights at Monza, big long straights at Le Mans. We will see 2 Glickenhauses there. Glickenhauses? Glickenhigh? I don't know. What is the plural of a Glickenhaus? Maybe that could be a question for the people in the comments who listen to this later. What is the plural of a Glickenhaus? Either way, that is going to be the week after the ELMS round, also at Monza, which will be the last hit out for those cars before Le Mans, which is only 2 months away as at the time of recording. And that's come along quick, because I did not expect... it's hard for me to believe that we're already most of the way through June, let alone, would have had Le Mans in a normal year by now.
Time flies when you're stuck at home.
I'm not even stuck at home. Oh, Christ. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me this evening, Ollie.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to our sponsor as well, the racingline.app, now on Android, so that way you can make sure that you don't miss any of the upcoming sports car action, whether that be ELMS or WC or IMSA for that matter. And yes, thank you very much for listening. We will have another episode coming up shortly, covering off all the ELMS, hopefully another one, or part of that one, talking about the N24 as well. But until then, yeah, it's been a good time. Peace out!